What happens inside the brain when it interprets an event as stressful? The brain signals a cascade of reactions, resulting in the release of epinephrine or adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol. The epinephrine and norepinephrine are fast acting and get the sympathetic nervous system activated, quickening the heart and focusing vision. Cortisol helps to slow down bodily systems that are not necessary for survival, like reproduction, immune response, digestion, and growth. This slowdown is a useful function in short spurts of time when we experience stress. When we are calm again, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and returns us to normal functioning. It's important to note that not all stress is bad. The stress response activates us so that we are alert, focused, and poised to use energy and resources to act. Stress engages the sympathetic nervous system, which revs us up and gets us ready for action, stimulating the heart to beat faster, lungs to take in more breath, and eyes to focus. There are times in our lives when a small amount of stress reaction can be helpful, such as when you're late for work and looking for your keys. You get activated to move around and search, your heart rate elevates, and your pupils constrict so you can focus your vision. The stress response system is especially useful in situations that are threatening to us. It leads us to run away from danger or freeze in place if that's the safest option. This is often called the fight, flight, or freeze response. We all experience stress in our lives, but very young children do not have the same ability to cope with stress or calm themselves down as adults. They are dependent on the caring adults in their lives to help them develop strategies to cope with stress. What helps you calm down from a stressful event might not be quite right for a child, especially a very young child. For example, talking to someone close to you. A preverbal or newly verbal child may not yet be able to express his feelings using words. Even children with strong language skills may not be able to put their feelings into words. Consequently, most young children act out their feelings. In early childhood, the part of the brain that controls our reactions to stress is fully developed at birth. However, the part of the brain that allows us to think about our feelings and to remember and reflect on past experiences is still maturing. This is why we might see a toddler have a tantrum in response to being denied a toy at the store, whereas a 9-year-old might still experience stress over the disappointment, but can better manage his emotions due to his more mature frontal cortex. Stress can be viewed along a continuum. Positive stress is on one end, tolerable stress in the middle, and toxic stress is on the other end. The major difference between these stress reactions is how quickly and effectively the child is able to become calm again, which is highly dependent on the situation and whether the child has someone to help him cope. Positive stress includes reactions to normal life experiences that are not dangerous or threatening to the person. Positive stress is a necessary aspect of healthy development that occurs as a result of exploring or learning something new or coping with everyday events. The stress is short-term in nature and often within the child's ability to cope with the support from an adult. For an adult, a positive stressor might be changing jobs. Your stress response allows you to increase your energy expenditure and focus, which helps you to adapt to this new experience that you can ultimately master and grow from. What about for children? If you think about it, they experience a fair amount of stress on a daily basis as they have to cope with the many changes and transitions that are a part of daily life, like waiting for dad to warm the bottle, not being the line leader or snack helper at preschool, or not getting a desired toy. The events are short-term, and the stress response system is quickly calmed with the help of an adult. These kinds of stressors also help children develop grit and resilience as they learn to master these challenges and build self-confidence. They are opportunities for adaptation and mastery. These normal stress experiences activate the stress response system for a short period. This response allows a child to act and focus, as well as develop coping mechanisms to deal with stress in the future. Tolerable stress is longer lasting and more intense, but is relieved by supportive relationships that help the child cope. Examples of tolerable stress are moving to a new home, getting a new childcare provider, or the loss of a family pet. This is stress associated with events that could trigger high cortisol release, which has the potential to disrupt brain architecture if it were prolonged. It is considered tolerable stress when it is relieved by supportive relationships that facilitate a child's ability to cope. Remember, children can experience tolerable stress that is time-limited without long-term developmental harm if they are supported by nurturing, caregiving relationships. Without these relationships and the support and protection they offer, tolerable stress can turn into toxic stress. Serious problems arise for both children and adults when we experience what is known as toxic stress. Toxic stress involves strong and prolonged activation of the body's stress response system in the absence of the buffering protection of adult support. High levels of stress over prolonged periods of time cause cortisol, a stress hormone, to continuously flood the brain, which can alter the way it develops. Stressors typical of toxic stress include recurrent child abuse and neglect, severe maternal depression, parental substance abuse, family violence, and the ongoing effects of living in poverty. Toxic stress includes events that are continuously activating the stress response system with no protection or comfort to help the very young child to feel safe, secure, and calm. When a child is exposed to continued and prolonged stress, there is increased connectivity in brain areas that activate and maintain stress responses. The limbic system becomes wired to interpret events most children would easily cope with as very stressful and dangerous. The wiring of their brains has been changed based on their toxic stress experiences. For example, a 4-year-old who has been abused by an uncle may cry and run for the comfort of a teacher, refusing to leave her side when an unfamiliar man enters the classroom to read a story to the class. Children who've experienced toxic stress are more easily triggered into a stress response and need a lot of comforting and soothing to calm down. When children exposed to toxic stress become older children and adults, their brains may be more vigilant or sensitized to threat or danger, resulting in a reduced capacity to focus on building healthy relationships and learning. These children are often more easily provoked than other children and tend to fall apart emotionally when they are disciplined. They can also often have more difficult paying attention or focusing on activities or tasks because their attention is focused on looking out for potential threat or danger. Remember, the difference between tolerable and toxic stress is not necessarily the event itself. Stress is made tolerable by a caring adult who helps the child to cope with the stressor, making it time-limited. In toxic stress, the stress response goes on for a prolonged period of time with no adult available to help or buffer the effects of the stress. As described, toxic stress can damage the developing brain architecture and create a short fuse for the body's stress response systems, leading to lifelong problems in learning, behavior, and both physical and mental health. These changes to brain architecture can be observed in brain scans. Let's compare two brain scans. The scan on the left shows a healthy or typically developing brain. The scan on the right shows the brain of a child who has had extremely adverse experiences, such as neglect, trauma, and abuse. The amount of red you see indicates brain activity. What you'll notice here is a general lack of activity, or red areas, in the brain scan on the right, where the child has had multiple sustained negative experiences. This child also shows a lack of activity in the temporal lobe, which is associated with processing auditory stimuli, comprehension, language, behavior, and short and long-term memory. There is also less relative activity in the frontal lobes, which govern problem solving and self regulation. By comparing these two, you see how devastating trauma or abuse can be to areas of the brain that are developing in early childhood. A child's negative experiences have changed the connections in the brain in ways that interfere with her ability to focus, retain information, and manage strong feelings, which you can imagine would provide many challenges for this child in the classroom. Thankfully, brain plasticity, or the ability to rewire brain connections, is greatest in early childhood. An important contribution to our understanding of the long-term effect of early experiences is the body of research that shows that adverse childhood experiences such as prolonged economic hardship, long-term separation from a parent like divorce, incarceration, or loss of a parent, witnessing domestic violence or other types of violence regularly, and experiencing abuse and or neglect lead to detrimental outcomes in adulthood. Researchers conclude that adverse childhood experiences can literally get under our skin and become integrated into our bodies in the form of impaired brain architecture, diminished immune status, poor metabolism, and poor cardiovascular function. Combined, these factors contribute to poor lifelong development, educational, and health outcomes. In fact, adverse childhood experiences have been found to be a cause of health risk behaviors, social malfunction, disease, disability, and death. The more adverse childhood experiences a child is exposed to in early childhood, the stronger the negative effects later in life. The good news is that studies reveal that there are protective factors that can buffer children against adverse experiences in the early years. For example, in a long-term study, researchers found that children who had experienced adverse events in childhood fared better as adults in terms of employment status, relationship status, and high school graduation rates. If they had a caring adult in their lives when they were young,